Welcome, everybody. Hello, Anna Lise. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Harris. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to be here with you. We've got people filtering in from the waiting room. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. As you join, please leave a comment or in the webinar chat with your where you're joining from in the world, what role you have, and we'll get to know each other a little bit just as we get started. Um, I know I say this every time we talk, Annalise, but I love the background. For anyone who can't tell, that is not a virtual background. That is a real
Real thing.
background.
Amazon's highest quality.
It's
So
perfect. Yep.
happy to share the link in a follow-up.
Yes, that'll go out in the show notes here. Um, all right. Oh, we got a lot of East Coasters on. North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland. I grew up in
We're
Maryland.
getting, I feel like everybody, even Canada.
Yep. It's international,
I
Annalise.
love it. We'll do it in French too.
Kansas
I
City area. I
actually
lived
can't.
there. I lived in Kansas City for a little while. My oldest son was born in Kansas City. We lived there for a total of 8 weeks, and my oldest was born there. That's kind of a wild story. But um, our right outside of DC. My dad lived on Capitol Hill. Oh, I got family in New York City. This is great. The candidate crew is excited to hear that you're going to do the presentation in French. So,
I absolutely should not. I'm already setting myself up for failure. I could maybe sing "Oh Canada," but that's about it.
can you sing "O Canada" in French?
Debatable how good it would be, but
Okay. Um, Maybe a
you'll
reason to
know the
stay
webinar
tuned
is
in
going
all the way
south
to
if I
the
whip that
end.
one out.
I think at the very end, you're singing "O Canada" in French. In French.
I gotta make sure I fill so we don't have any extra time.
Um, Well, it's great to see where everyone's from. Thanks everyone for joining us. Really excited to have Annalise with us. We are going to jump right in. We've got so much good content to cover. Let me share my screen, which has the great content that Annalise has put together for us. Why don't we just start with the title of this presentation, Annalise? Why did you want to call this David Onboarding Goliath? I love it.
Thank you. I love it too. And then I was a little bit intimidated by the fact that I set myself up for such a big topic. My husband even asked me last night, "Do you have to talk about David and Goliath? Is it too late to change?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's too late, babe." Uh, I currently work for a company called Quantum Metric, and we'll get into more of the details later, but Quantum is a data analytics SaaS platform that has been resoundingly successful. I got really lucky to come in early, and I particularly was brought in to help with our onboarding, and it was the first thing I started doing, and it's the same thing I'm doing now. And every day I feel like I'm David onboarding some of our Goliath clients. But as we started talking and working through this content, I realized there are some really great takeaways from this kind of classic historical story of the underdog versus the established. And I am really looking forward to hopefully starting a dialogue about what these two competing forces are like and how they affect our day-to-day lives in whatever business or environment you might be in.
Yeah, as you'll see, Annalise has a lot of wisdom to share. And one thing that's just particularly fascinating is to learn. There's been a lot of success at Quantum Metric, but as any of us know who are part of any organization, so I'm sure everyone on the call, there's also a lot behind the scenes. Sometimes it's like a duck on the water, and there's a lot happening under the surface. And so we're going to peel back the layers of some of that. And this analogy of David and Goliath will kind of be a recurring theme here. But let's jump right into it. Annalise, a little bit about yourself before we hear about your company and what you all have done.
Okay, before we get started, I'm going to add my own icebreaker, which is I would be really curious in the chat if people can share what they think their most super secret special skill is, the thing that you know you're great at that nobody ever asks you about. Uh, I'm really curious because there are things about my background that nobody ever asks me about. And since I get to be the person talking and on this slide, I'm going to take that advantage. So please share with me what you are so proud of in your own life that you wish other people shouted out about for you. Uh, as this slide says, I am a program manager at Quantum Metric. I work with our customer success team. I actually have a pretty unique background. Up until March 13th in 2020, I had been a professional actor for nearly 20 years. I was in rehearsal the day that lockdown orders came through in 2020, and I won't bore you with all the details of how I became a project manager. But what I did want to talk about is there are a lot of assumptions that people make about actors. Some of them, at least for me, are definitely correct. Like I'm hopefully pretty good at public speaking. I'm good at stakeholder management. I'm very comfortable in high stress situations. But the most important thing people never ask me about is my meticulous attention to detail. Being a professional actor really means that you're the CEO of a very small company of you. I was running my own budget for my entire business. I was very successful for so long. And I wish people asked me about that more often. The way that you have to negotiate and work with vendors or make sure invoices are paid. And I feel like there's so many cool ways in which my acting career actually
Yeah.
prepared me for 100% what I'm doing now in program management and project management. I'm looking at what people are saying in the
There's
chat.
a
This
lot of
is
good
the
stuff coming
Brandon,
through.
the sourdough starter has been a theme of my day. You're the third person today to message, and Abby too. That's so cool.
Wow. Um, but I love the background. I mean, first of all, I think that it's always very fun and enlightening when you can find a tangential kind of line of work and see analogies or benefits to the line of work you're doing. And to think of a production as the ultimate onboarding and the ultimate project that needs to be managed. And you
Yeah.
have to understand the dependencies and you have to understand how long everything's going to take. And it has to all come together at the same time. And you have to be sympathetic and be able to be empathetic and understand what needs to happen when and manage a lot. So yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. You want to know, it's really funny. There are the theater world in particular, the acting world has really strong ways in which we roles and responsibilities, they're very clear, and that's something that I wish that we had a little
Yeah,
bit more of in most corporations, but certainly in startups, which we're going to
yeah,
talk about a lot today.
yeah.
I also just want to say, Lily is a Bible nerd. I hope you're here as not going to check me on my David and Goliath references because I'm not sure it can hold that up. But uh, this is a brief overview of kind of the major 3 points we're going to talk about today. How we at Quantum have scaled our internal teams during a time of hypergrowth, our process or what we are creating to be the process, and then emotional change management, but really with a focus on the emotional aspects of it. So that's just a
Great.
forward view before we jump into it.
Let's dive right in.
Let's do it. So if anybody doesn't remember, or maybe you never were taught, the story of David and Goliath is a pretty common story amongst the modern world of the underdog versus the establishment.
Yeah.
If we go back to the original story, uh, we're at war. One army is doing really well. This is Goliath's team, and the other team, not so much. They're not having a very good time. They're losing. And before we go any further down this rabbit hole, I just want to make it really clear that this analogy is not going to be perfect. And at no point in time do I feel like I am at war with anybody or that my company is at war with anybody. Quantum is incredibly lucky and fortunate to be working with the teams and the companies that we work with. But if you've ever done an onboarding or tried to scale a team, I think you'll understand why we can compare it to a battlefield pretty easily. So we've got our two teams who are fighting. And in the story, David is a young shepherd who just happens upon the battlefield. He didn't come to fight, but he sees his community, his team, or his coworkers, and they're in a pretty rough shape. And this is what I had forgotten about the story. David doesn't actually volunteer to fight because he sees Goliath and thinks, oh, I can take that guy. He sees his friends and he thinks, I want to help them. And I think we're going to circle back to this idea a lot. The difference between I can win this or I can take on this challenge and prevail versus I will do anything to help the people that I care about. And I have come to notice that both of these energies are actually imperative. Back to our story. David sees his friends are kind of in a bad state. He goes to the king and he says, I think I can do this. I think I can help. And the king is super dubious and he says, okay, sure, whatever, David. David shocks everyone by taking off his armor, goes and gets 5 stones, meets Goliath, who's kind of a jerk. David takes his first stone, flings it at Goliath, and thus is the story we all know. Boom, he falls down. There's beheading, there's victory, yada, yada. This is the classic story. So before we get started further, I imagine in your current role or position, there is a situation right now that you're dealing with where, for whatever reason, there is an underdog. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else, or maybe even more likely, or an unimaginable situation, the longer established industry standards or traditionally held beliefs that are being held onto really tightly. So as we're talking throughout this call, sometimes I'm going to be referring to David as program manager, as somebody who is fighting the establishment. Sometimes I'm also Goliath. Sometimes quantum metric is David. Sometimes it's also Goliath. And sometimes we're both at the same time. So go with me. We're going to have a good time. I'm hoping that this conversation can be open and collaborative. So please feel free to ask clarifying questions, or if I'm not being clear, I would love to talk about this. In general, this Goliath energy versus David energy. And let's jump in. When Quantum Metric was first founded about, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, we were 2 employees and now we're about 403. I work on our customer success team, which has 104 individuals. We just achieved a milestone of $100 million in ARR last January. And I do want to take a quick moment to share some facts about why we are in this extreme hypergrowth. The industry standard for hypergrowth is 40% of compound annual growth rate. Quantum averages a little over 50. Our current SaaS renewal rate is 94%. And if any of you guys are working in SaaS, you will know that this is a really great number. We are really lucky and really, really grateful to have this type of stickiness and favorability among our clients. Lastly, and this is pretty cool, 45% of the world's internet experiences are currently being captured by Quantum Metric. So thanks, Jordan, for the applause. I'm hoping that's for QM. Again, we're capturing nearly half of the world's internet experiences, and we've got a team of 400. So this is where I was like, David Goliath, we got it. We are the underdogs. I don't know if any of you guys are working in SaaS as well, but in this particular call, I want to focus a little bit on our onboarding and a little bit about how that works for our internal teams as we're onboarding other teams. And to that, I want to tell a brief story. On a daily basis, those 140 customer success team members are working pretty tirelessly to onboard, support, triage, and ultimately, hopefully, delight some of the world's biggest companies. And if you are an American, or maybe Canada, you might know this as well, I'm going to challenge you to think of a telecommunications company or a cell phone carrier in America off the top of your head. Think of one of the big ones. And if you have a big cell phone carrier from the US in your head, I will tell you we already have that client. If you think of the second largest you can think of, we also already have that client. And if you think of the third largest you can think of, we are about to sign them as a client. For a little bit of context for what this looks like, my average implementation of a new team would be 3 digital properties. And our average implementation time is 45 days, which has actually gone down since I started. When I first came in, it was about 89 or 90 days. So we've nearly cut that in half already. And that was before we brought in GUIDEcx, which is obviously part of the reason that I'm here today. The biggest onboarding I've ever done concurrently for one client is 18 digital properties. And the fastest we've ever completed any implementation, thanks to GUIDEcx, is 26 days. Now, this new telco that I'm going to call Goliath Co. because I cannot tell you their name at this time, is coming in with 27 digital properties, and they would like to be onboarded before November 1st. So I don't know if any of you guys are doing that quick math, but 27 digital properties before November 1st. This is what I'm talking about with David and Goliath. I'd be curious if you guys have ever, in your experience, gone through something that you did not remotely think was going to make you Savannah's secondhand stretch. I absolutely am not losing sleep about this yet. I know we will figure out how to do it, but these are actively things that are discussions we're having every day, thoughts that are keeping me up at night. And really, I am hoping that through this conversation, I can perhaps inspire you. But if you can inspire me, or if you have any ideas, I beg of you to reach out and share them with me, because I know I don't have all the answers and we're learning on the fly as we
Yeah.
go.
But just before we move on, I just want the audience to know that this is why we wanted to have Anna Lise on for all of you, because she's about to go through this, you know, massive effort with their new customer. And it's not creating a ton of stress because she's so well prepared. And
That's very
it's
sweet of you to say.
not a
I'm
ton,
looking good.
creating
Not a ton,
some
yeah.
like it would for any of us, but she's well prepared for it. And again, to this theme of David and Goliath, we've got a classic underdog story, but maybe you've had this realization on your own, or maybe you, like many, have read Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath book. And there's this idea of perceived advantages and disadvantages, and how do you use what you have as an advantage? How as the young upstart, as the small team, how do you help make sure that you feel well prepared to, to kind of meet the moment that you need to meet? And so, yeah, we'll kind of jump into how Annalise and team have prepared to do that, and how they feel like, hey, no, we can do this. Even with the, I guess, the natural level of stress that comes with something like this, being able to say with a straight face to the sales team or to other stakeholders internally, we got this. Like we can do it. In Savannah's theme of secondhand stress, leave a note in the chat on the tightest timeline you've ever been asked to deliver an onboarding on. We'll see who takes the cake for that. But
I
anything
will
else?
happily give my crown away to somebody else. Somebody else tell me you did it.
All right. Let's talk about the eager dragons.
Let's do it. So at Quantum Metric, we actually call ourselves dragons. There's a brief history about why we do this. Quantum was was the first awarded unicorn startup in the first year we reached unicorn status. And our CEO, Mario Chiobara, said, "What eats unicorns? Dragons. I don't want to be a unicorn. I want to be a dragon." So you will notice a lot of dragon themes
Not
in this
competitive.
presentation. Not competitive at all.
No,
Exactly. Not a very atypical CEO mindset, I'm sure.
I love it.
And I also recognize too that I really missed the dad joke of talking about scales and scaling teams on this dragon
Oh,
slide, and I apologize in advance that I didn't figure that out until just now. Uh, a huge uh, thing that has been really important for me and our teams as we have been learning how to deal with this scale is actually acknowledging that uh, one of our internal team's greatest strengths is the thing that has been 100% uh, part of what's been holding us back. And let me explain that a little bit deeper. We really go out of our way to look for employees who are incredibly passionate. They have a community mindset. We all fumble for the ball. We don't need directives to be told. I think this is pretty common among startups. So perhaps if you're working at a smaller company, this is similar to what you guys are hiring for. I think also in general, people that are eager and happy to work towards the goals of the company are attractive candidates. It's taken me a while to understand that there is a flip side to this eagerness that is actually been really detrimental to our ability to scale. And before I go any deeper, I'm going to throw out a challenge to the members of this call. If you are a leader of a team, I would like you to think about who who on your team could articulate, if not directly your SLA, or if you're not customer facing, who can repeat back to you the expectations of how requests are handled, how responsibilities are juggled? Do they know how to push back? Do they know how to prioritize? And if they can't do that, why not? Can you? Is that actually in place? For us at Quantum, it didn't exist in the beginning. The When we were just a startup, it was like, we're going to get it done because we need to get it done. And we hired people who are happy to get it done. This worked really well until the point where all of those eager dragons turn into burnt out dragons. And I will say that the loss of that internal team member, whether it's for a day or two, or God forbid, if they move on to another opportunity, the insider knowledge that we uh, lose if we lose a team member, even for a brief amount of time, is really difficult. So I needed to take a really good look at what this was causing as the like downfall effect of this eagerness. One of the really good examples of this is we started a new ticketing system this past year. I think it was in December, January of this past year. I actually asked about ticketing systems in my very first interview 3.5 years ago, and it took me this long to actually get one in place. We had not been working with a centralized ticketing system until just recently. And when we finally got it in place, I was so excited that I was volunteering to do whatever I could to make sure the adoption was going well. And that included offering to help teams take their existing requests and migrating them into the new platform so that the adoption would be seamless and easy, and the lift for the team was relatively low. When I was doing this, we came across one of our teams, which is a smaller corporate client by our team's size, not a ginormous enterprise client like the Goliath telco that we're talking about. And they had 108 open requests that they had not yet delivered to their client. And not only did I not want to copy and paste and move 108 requests, but it was a bigger issue of, there's no way that the client is happy about this. And actually, Harris, I learned such a great thing from you when we were talking about this, and I'd love to pass it back to you about the difference between being eager to help, eager to please, and being more eager to prescribe. And I don't know if you wanted to
Yeah.
share more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's funny, and it came from the conversation with you, but it was this idea that I think all of us, to some extent, in customer-facing roles, we are eager to help, right? We are, to back to that David analogy, we see our friends and we're like, I want to help them. And those friends are our customers, those friends are our team members, and we want to help take care of them. And so sometimes in that customer-facing role, you can be so accommodating that the pendulum kind of goes too far, and prescription is on the other side of that, right? And striking the balance of being accommodating versus being prescriptive. And as you asked everyone to think about, hey, how many people on your team really understand the different protocols that are required to successfully onboard a customer? How well do your templates in GUIDEcx reflect that, or just your documents internally? Like, how well do your internal team members understand where it's appropriate for them to push back, to hold a line, where they have a lot of leeway? And I think the irony to this is, if you are too accommodating and you're not prescriptive enough, you actually damage your perception with the customer. You damage the customer experience. There is a balance, right? You do want to, whatever cliche, the customer comes first, the customer is always right. You want to take care of your customer. But if I go to see a doctor and I say, hey, here's what's going on, and the doctor says, oh, okay, well, what should we do about it? What are you most comfortable doing about it? Like, maybe there's some extent to that I would appreciate. Hey, thank you for caring about my comfort level with these different paths, but I'm also here to see a doctor. I'm here for someone to tell me, this is what we're going to do. This is what I would do if I were you. and here's how I would do it. Here's what you have to be ready for. Here's what's going to come next. And so you cannot be afraid to strike that balance because often it resonates better with the customer to hear, okay, I'm following an expert, I'm following a guide, if you will, and I know that they're going to get me there. And now maybe the accommodating part of that equation comes in and like, do you understand this well enough? Are you comfortable enough with it? What minor tweaks can we make to be sure that we get there? But this is the right way to go.
Yeah, 100%. And this is where that David energy versus the Goliath energy is a flip of a coin, right? The David energy is, sure, what do you want to do? We can do it. We'll try it. That sounds like an exciting thing to try. And the standard would be like, this is what has been successful. This is what we've seen work. We recommend starting here. You mentioned templates. Really difficult at Quantum for me to get anything templatized because our platform itself is so robust. It's a really sophisticated, complex platform. And so it produces really sophisticated, complex answers and results. And it can be really difficult to sell that as a like a miracle tool and then turn around and make it a template, right? So partnering too with the expectations of the sales team who want to share what is a miracle solution to a lot of our clients and then come in with a template can feel really jarring. So making sure that that language makes sense too. Like, yes, we are eager to guide you, to lead you, to prescribe what might be success and be partners working on that together. Our teams were just not set up in the beginning, and we're still working on how we uh, allow them to be the authority. I mean, I think that's such a when you are working with teams that are collaborative and want to be partners, it's really difficult to put on your but I'm the authority hat as well, and striking that balance for uh, especially people maybe who are younger in their career, they're newer to the platform, they're maybe not as uh, experienced in QM, they haven't been here for 3 years like me. That can be a really difficult thing. There's a lot more internal enablement that we needed to do to really make sure that our team felt supported, that they felt like they knew the boundaries of their role, and also like where they needed to push back a little bit on the client in a loving and supportive way towards their business goals.
Yeah.
And a takeaway for the entire group, I think, is like what communication is needed to make it really clear to your teams what a strong yes looks like, what a strong no looks like, and how to discern the majority, which is what falls in between. Um, and also what
Yeah.
members of your team might need more empowerment, or maybe what team members need less empowerment. Obviously, if my CEO comes and asks me to do something, there's no pushing back on that one. I'm going to do it. Happy to do it. But maybe there needs to be a better balance struck between where you've ended up, just because everything's been moving really quickly.
Yeah. Great. Let's move on here.
Love it. So this next topic, process, we've really been trying to, as I mentioned, up level to meet our clients' needs. We are a small company. We work with some massive, big corporations. Again, 45% of the world's internet users are somehow being used with a quantum metric. And that is like driving a really nice car really fast on the freeway. And when you're driving that car at 95 miles an hour, you are not paying attention to anything other than what is directly in front of you.
And
And
hopefully you're on a closed road with,
hopefully,
yeah.
hopefully, hopefully, maybe we're in Germany, we're on the Autobahn. I feel like that uh, the bigger question of like who is looking at the map sometimes gets a little lost by the wayside for two reasons. One, because when you're growing this quickly, when the customers are signing, thank God they're signing. We are so lucky. Again, please don't remotely think that I'm complaining, but we don't have enough time to sit back and think about how we're going to get there often. We just got to figure out how we're going to get it done. And so the balance between the road that we're on and the speed that we're moving and the vision, if you're the person like me who's constantly trying to go back to the vision and say, whoa, 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 let's slow down a bit, that's not fun. I don't think people are really excited when I come into a situation and just start asking all the practical questions that make it feel less exciting. And it's been a really hard lesson to learn that there's a balance to be struck between the road that we're on, the vision that we all might have, and then what is actually going to happen. Because an example like this new telco onboarding, I'm not going to be able to push back on this timeline. Absolutely not. There's going to be no room for me to wiggle. There might be with a smaller client, there might be some ways I could push back, but this is going to be something we're just going to have to figure out how to get it done. And I want to figure out how to get it done again with that David mindset without killing the team, without demoralizing anyone, with still feeling like we're celebrating and having success.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think
I would love,
recognizing that,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think recognizing that it's a journey, right? I mean, to take the analogy, that vision is important to hold it in your mind and to have someone with the map out that you're getting there, but understanding that the road you're on now and the path to get there, there are going to be steps along the way. So not being able to immediately be at the grand vision that you have in your mind, it's okay, right? You'll take a step at a time to get there.
I'm not sure it is okay, but I will say that I am learning how to let it be okay. I
Yeah,
definitely, this
yeah,
has been on my journey. I've been letting it go.
yeah.
Um, when we talk about that emotional change management, I'm pretty sure everybody on this call is well versed in the pitfalls of change management in general. So instead of kind of beating that old horse, I want to talk really openly and kind of vulnerably about how I personally have maybe failed or failed upward in this trajectory. Um, if we're going back to the story about David volunteering because he saw the pain and suffering of his people, not because he thought he could win, I often, when I come up with a solution, I'm coming at it as if like I have won this problem. I have succeeded. I know how to kill this. I'm going to come in. Please, everybody love me. I am the white knight savior of all your problems. And this has certainly not always been the easiest way to go forward because the reality is nobody looked at David and said like, yeah, David, you go get him.
Yeah.
You're going to kill it. I think they looked at him a little bit like he was crazy. And in this scenario, that's been a big reminder for me that people might be thinking about me a little bit like I'm crazy. At a hyper growth company as an operationally minded program manager, there were some massive big blank spots, and I want to call them out by name because I think people on this call might feel the exact same way, or you might, if you're thinking of a particular situation or problem that you're looking at, this might be worth a little bit of internal or external uh, time. The first, obviously, is this emotional awareness. Like I said, not everyone's going to think I'm the knight in shining armor who came in to solve everyone's problems, even if they are saying out loud, I hate the way we do this. Sometimes when I come in and say, I have a solution for that, they respond back with, I don't like that response either. And that's been really difficult. Like, I thought you didn't like it. I tried to change it. Here's how we might do it. But the bigger thing underneath that for us, and I think this is imperative for teams that are in growth or startups or places where change is happening often, our resiliency for change is so low. Our teams are just working so fast. Changes are often ignored because, again, if you're driving 95 miles an hour on the highway, you're not paying attention to what's happening on the sidelines, and unless it's directly affecting what's in front of you. Um, we are working overall to be better about that type of um, how would I want to call it? Maybe like a staggered change management release so that our teams can build up resiliency. I think what was happening for a while is it felt like things changed constantly. There was a new process or new procedure every other day. One team would bring something new and then it would try to launch and it didn't successfully launch or nobody got on board and it had to relaunch again. People have a lot of fatigue.
Yeah.
I
When
don't, I wasn't prepared for that.
we talked about burnout a little bit ago, and that can contribute to it as well, right? If your team doesn't
Yeah.
know where they can push back and they don't know where they can escalate and they don't know like the lanes on the road for their own role, That's one thing. And then if you layer on top of that these rapid change management initiatives, and you haven't really put yourself in their shoes and understood, oh, we need to pace this out a little bit, it can all just compound.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and this is not me trying to brown nose to the Guide CX team, but when we brought in Guide CX recently, 100% the right tool, 100% the best possible time I could try to squeeze in between other things that were also happening, and it was not ideal. It was not. We didn't get enough runway. We didn't have enough time to change. And again, I knew that was happening, but what I wasn't really prepared for was how team members who are just overwhelmed and they're moving so fast and they're
Yeah.
constantly playing whack-a-mole. I needed to build in more space for a slow burn of adoption. I thought if I made it really simple and really easy, like the barrier of entry was really low, that people would say, great, thank you. Awesome. I only need to spend 15 minutes worrying about this and then I'll move on. And in reality, what I needed to do was like almost a guerrilla marketing campaign of change management. I needed to work through smaller teams, smaller stakeholders. And that's what we've done uh, since then to try to
Yeah.
mitigate because it was just too much change too quickly without enough follow up because you're just too rushed. There's just too much happening and you don't always have a chance to slow down. So if you don't have the time to slow down, how can you think about it in a slightly different way? And again, as a neurotic person, I want to do it my way. And instead, I have to do it the way that will hopefully make our teams and everyone the happiest.
Yeah. Great.
So again, going back to our story about David, the other part that I had forgotten, other than David trying to be helpful to his friends, is David grabbed 5 stones. And I think that's really important that it, at least for me, when I remembered the story in my head before revisiting it, I kind of thought David went in, like, I got this. I know how I'm really good at stones. I only need one. But instead, he had 5. And I think he got lucky that the first one worked, and a lot of times we are not so lucky. And of course, we all know how to have contingency plans. We all know how to manage risk. I won't belabor that too much, but I do want to get into some specifics about how this has played out, just in case it gives some inspiration to you guys in what you're working on right now. So let's jump to the next slide if you don't mind, Harris.
Yep.
Data-driven decision making. Obviously, this is such an obvious buzzword. I'm sure that everybody on this call is aware of what I mean by this, but I want to give 2 really specific examples of how this was not working out for us. Um, Without data-driven decision making, we were using anecdotal and emotional decision making, and I wasn't able to help our teams without being able to rely on so and so said, or this is what's happened here. Sometimes it was, I am yelling the loudest, therefore I will get the response that I need, which is great for me because I'm really loud and I can yell really loudly, and that's why I get stuff done. But that's also not sustainable for me. So again, GUIDEcx was a great part of this. Our internal ticketing system is huge for how we're able to help our teams with setting boundaries. Before it was uh, me just making guesses and trying to talk to people and being able to get as much information in one place to make data decisions meant that instead of burning the entire village, I could just burn the parts of the village where we knew we needed to take that thing down. That's not working. The other thing we did, and I love this idea, and I'd love to share this in the follow up from this call when we send out the recording, is we actually did what's called a meeting doomsday. We went through a systematic approach where we canceled all internal meetings for 2 weeks. We did a full audit of every internal meeting, whether that was a one-on-one, a account sync, a stand-up, any of the meetings that would just be internal QM employees only. And also, we asked our teams to look at how often they were meeting with the client. And if there was a recurring meeting with the client, like what is the value of this meeting? What are the tangible outputs? How are we measuring the success of this meeting? And that 2 weeks was so successful that now we do that process at the end of every quarter. So the last week of every quarter at Quantum is actually a no meeting week where our teams are focused on either wrapping up what's still outstanding from the previous quarter, and especially for our CSMs and account managers, they spend that time thinking proactively about uh, what they want to envision for the next coming quarter. And I think that's a really applicable small way in which our calendars just, we set something as an auto repeat meeting, and it's easy to get on. It's easy to just jump on a call and lose track of what's the value here, and are we really getting what we need, and is this helping us? So taking time to actually look at the data, take some time. What in your village needs to be burned down? Maybe there's something that's not serving you anymore. And can you slow down enough from the hyperspeed to think about that? Those are two of the most impactful things that we've done in a practical way.
I love that because I think, like you mentioned, everyone understands the concept of data-driven decision making. But one big takeaway that I hope you all try to implement is how do you make space for your team and yourself to really do the analysis necessary to make the right decisions with the data you have. If you're constantly going and going and going, and you never take that time, you may be fooling yourself if you think you're making data-driven decisions.
Yeah. I think too, you can also make data do a lot of work for you, that you need to take some quiet time to really make sure
Yeah.
you're looking at it clearly, right? Like it's easy to miss the question if we don't take the time. The next stone that I personally am really following or doubling down on is kind of this idea of courage over convention. And going back to our David analogy, David is courage, Goliath is convention. Quantum is still a startup. We're trying to dismantle the industry. So we're always looking for courage over convention. But this plays out in an interesting way sometimes, where sometimes what I am arguing for is something different than the conventional approach that we've been doing. I might say something along the lines of, what if we stop driving at 95 miles an hour just for a little bit? And that's hard to hear. That's hard to communicate. And sometimes it feels incredibly risky. Um, so, in that communication of risk and opportunity, I have personally noticed I need to double down on how I interact with the major stakeholders at my company. Um, we all can go really quickly from a startup mindset of like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, to we've never done it that way before. And you can vacillate to that almost within one sentence.
Yeah.
Uh, I feel like it can be, probably people on this call can identify with, it can be really uncomfortable to be the person who's the Debbie Downer, who's like, okay, well, can we talk about how we're realistically going to make this happen? That all sounds well and good, but I don't know how this will practically look. So I have two suggestions that probably people have heard of before, but they certainly are working for me, which is compliment sandwich. So anytime somebody approaches me, even if my first instinct is to just clench my pearls and just gasp because I'm terrified of how we are going to do 27 onboardings, I'll say something like, wow, that is so exciting. Can you tell me more about this timeline? I would love to help make this hugely successful. Especially with our sales team, I have found this to be really helpful, that like the excitement of moving quickly, you don't want to take the wind out of their sails. It's easier if you can kind of keep it up and then ask your questions in the middle. And the second I steal from basically my acting career from improv, it's yes and, right? We've all heard that before of like, yes, I really want to help you with that. And it would be really great if we sat down and make a scope so I can make those deliverables really crystal clear for everyone. And this has been harder than I think it feels to say out loud. Uh, I think it's really difficult to be the person in an org who is trying to make a change, whatever that conventional thing might be, whether it's a process or a tool that you've always used that you think needs to be changed, or it's a way of thinking or a direction you want to head into. I think my assumption is people in roles that would come to a call like this would identify with me. And I also want to just give a little bit of compassion that it can feel a little lonely too. Like this, sometimes it can feel like I'm the only person who's worried about how it's going to happen. We're all in line that we should do it, but I'm the only one asking, how is this going to actually practically work out? And again, if you guys have any suggestions or best practices that have worked for you, I'm happy to hear them, and I would love to share because this is an ongoing everyday thing.
And I want to tie something back to what you laid out with the eager dragons, right? And we had a brief conversation of being prescriptive versus accommodating, and where do we fall on that spectrum, and when do we put one hat on versus the other. I think we can empower our people to have courage in the things that they are experts in, and to not be ashamed or afraid or hesitant of that. And even to understand that if they don't speak with the voice of expertise for the things where they are experts, then there's no one left to be an expert on that. If you're the
Yeah,
one in the room who's an expert on what it takes to onboard the customer, you need to have courage to speak up. And you need to do it in the right way where you're not taking wind out of sails, but you're helping set real expectations. And I think you will find that that helps your team members and also your leaders on that continuum of being prescriptive versus being accommodating, deliver the right tone and strike the right balance so that a customer is grateful that they know what's coming, that your sales team is better equipped to help set expectations with the customers, and be your partner throughout the onboarding process when and where needed, and that your team is not being burnt out unnecessarily because they have a clear understanding of, hey, here's where you're an expert, here's where you need to be prescriptive, and here are things where you're not, where you don't, and
yeah.
where you should be accommodating, and where you should have ears wide open.
And I think too, this also is where I need to keep myself in check of my own balance of courage over convention too, where right now I'm begging for a templatized version of something. And I also need to leave a huge corner of grace that that template is going to become the old way really
Yeah.
quickly. And I always need to have courage to go looking for what the new way is supposed to be because right now I might feel like I'm pushing the envelope, but I will become the envelope sooner rather than later. So
True.
it's just like it's a constant back and forth battle, and both things need to be present and be respectful of each other, I think. Okay. I think if there's anything that I believe with like every part of my being, it's that the only cure for burnout that can be done in community is celebration. And I don't know if other people in your organizations are uh, struggling with burnout the way that we can be at Quantum. Again, we're trying to do a pretty impossible thing. 140 customer success teams working with as many massive organizations that we're working with. It's a pretty impossible task that we're doing every single day. And I believe that there is every day reasons I should be celebrating and shouting from the rooftops how great our teams are. And sometimes that does look like a big official event or an offsite or a flag, but I actually think it's the small ways in which we get the most value. Um, for example, I was actually having a conversation yesterday and with a account manager, manager of account management at Quantum, and we decided it would be really cool if we figured out an auto trigger so that every time we reached a certain milestone in our onboardings, it went to our Slack so that we could automatically all celebrate that milestone being
Yeah.
hit. And then we also get a little bit of data and we get to ask questions of like, congrats to your CSC team. How were you that successful? What was the secret sauce? Um, and we can do the data, we can do the look back, the retrospective, but we can do it in a way that feels celebratory, that feels like shouting our successes from the rooftop. Because if you're not celebrating, if you're not slowing down, it's just that constant marathon. It's just that constant race. And that's the only way as a leader that we can make room for our teams to really start to do their own personal self-care that they need to do when it comes to burnout.
So true. Yeah.
So in essence, I guess these are my takeaways. Empowering teams really clearly with defined yeses and nos to help prevent burnout. Uh, how do your teams know what yes looks like, what no looks like, and what's the system and process for most of what comes in between? And I would say in customer success, 98% of that is in the middle. None of this is ever going to be perfect, of course, but if you don't have the beginning of a process to start answering this for your teams or helping them answer it, this is a huge thing for us, and we're still working on it. Um, this big thing, our eager dragons, identifying this desirable team member trait that might be hindering your growth. Are there ways in which you've not shot yourself in the foot, but you've brought in exactly what you asked for and you're getting exactly what you wanted, which is eager, responsible, and really great people and an overwhelming amount of success. And now we need to empower them with the opposite side to support that success. That to me has been such a compassionate way to look at all of our situations. And I think really freeing for our team members as we've helped them uh, enable to that level of authority and that I am the doctor. If you came to see me, I will tell you what I think. Uh, this monitoring the balance between actively taking risks, being the David of the situation, and then also the long-term stability, the Goliath. This probably is the essence, the middle of the Venn diagram of my career right now at Quantum. We are a risk-taking org and we're trying to figure out what sustainability looks like. And that's where my passion and my heart lies right now. And I'm sure you're all dealing with a situation like that. And if you're not, why not? If you are never taking risks, that's got to
Yeah.
feel kind of maybe boring, maybe needs a little bit of time. I think there's a lot to be learned from either side of the coin, no matter which side you might be on. Uh, Lastly, and I think maybe we skipped over this, so I'll briefly touch on it. Actively pursuing solutions from unlikely sources. David didn't go to fight a fight. He just happened to be there and nobody said no to him. There are a lot of ways in which I think we can look for all the usual places for answers and solutions. And sometimes when we invite unexpected people to the table, we might get more than we bargained for in a really surprisingly great way. And lastly, celebration is the only community antidote for burnout that at least I have known. And I would love to also hear what other people are doing to celebrate in ways that are sustainable. And especially if they're a remote first company, it's a hard challenge that we have particularly. And lastly, I know we talked about, oh, you skipped we were talking about Goliath Telco and my 27 onboardings, but I also need to tell you that about the same time that we're onboarding Goliath Co, we're also onboarding Goliath Co Airlines, which happened to have the largest number of US passenger flights in 2023. So not just one CP, we're doing two at a time. So send me all of your skills and all of your help. I will take it via email, LinkedIn. I would love to connect and reach out. So it's just been such a pleasure and I'd love to answer or talk about any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Anna Lise. Yeah, here's how you can get in touch with Anna Lise, and keep this conversation going. We can also keep it going in community.guidecx.com. But these are things that can help all of us in whatever stage we're at. So really appreciate you putting thought behind this and coming and sharing some of what you've learned as you are on the front lines in the battlefield, and helping kind of bring this to all of us. So thank you, and thanks to everyone who joined. We will send out a recording, we'll send out slides, and Annalise even has some extra material that we'll include in there as well that can help, as you all look to make better decisions, help protect your team, help give a great experience to your customers, and find the right moments to be David and the right moments to be Goliath. So yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.